Rick Strong.
How you doing, buddy? And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for joining us. You know, we've talked about ego quite a bit, and we have audience members ask us to continue to talk about ego. And so we're going to do just that today. Today's show topic is how to manage ego for a more peaceful life.
Man, that's a great topic, and it's something that we always take for granted about ego being not so good, and maybe we should keep it under control. But many people don't know how to do that, and many of the teachers who talk about invalidating ego or trying to minimize it don't help us with how to do it either.
Right. You know, and the first thing I had to do when people would talk about ego, and when I was younger, they talked about it like it was not a bad thing. You know, it was like you need a healthy ego because it helps you have better drive, and it's kind of tied to it's a healthy definition for self-esteem and those things. And what I found was ego for me created this separate self. You know, that there was this division between my conscious self that wants to be loving, wants to be kind, wants to consider others. My ego was separate from that. It was all about me, the selfish part of me. And as I got older, I learned that almost anything that was rooted or that appealed to that side of me brought a lot of suffering with it. Short-term pleasure, long-term suffering. And so when I finally got that, I started to wonder, how can I get over it, or how can I control it? And the best I've come up so far is learning how to manage it.
Yeah, good for you. Well, I think the main thing, first of all, I think we have to establish that unless you're someone who's extraordinarily powerful, it's very difficult to eliminate it. I don't think it can be eliminated. At least I don't think I can eliminate my own ego. But I can do two things that are really important that decrease the suffering, as you point out. And the first is just to monitor it and to be aware of it, to be aware of when the ego is trying to protect you. And there's nothing to protect. There's no reason for you to protect. I mean, you're always dealing with somebody else's opinion, wanting to look good, wanting to not look bad. And so you're trying, the ego is trying its best to put you in the best light. When you're aware of that, that's painful, because if you feel like you're being made fun of, or you're being ridiculed, or something, your ego is going to act out and create, as you say, problems. So the first step, I think, is just to be aware of it. Where is the ego getting me in trouble? And usually that's tied to the second part, which helps me control my ego, which is the second part is, it's always about me. In other words, if you put yourself first all of the time, if you continue to always put yourself first, you're going to create enormous trouble for yourself, enormous problems for yourself, and you're going to suffer and miss the opportunity to connect with other people. And other people, as you point out, we're all the same.
Absolutely.
So monitoring and then recognizing that if you put yourself first, it's a trap.
Do you have a couple little things that help you know when your ego is coming up? Like, you know, is there something that tips you off to it?
Yeah, I think basically any time it has to do with me wanting somebody else to do what I want them to do.
Okay, that's how it shows up for you.
That's how it shows up for me. If only you were more like me, we wouldn't have a problem.
Exactly. So give me an example of that.
Okay, well, an easy one is traffic. Another one is being in a relationship and having an issue about where to go to eat, or what movie to watch, or how to say something to a friend that may have wronged you. You know, I think those things are very telling. And again, the test is this something that I'm doing to make myself look good, or to protect myself, or to put myself before other people? And if it is, that's ego, and that's going to be a problem for you.
Right. Yeah, some of the tip-offs for me, God, there's so many, because my ego is trying to, like, be present in every situation 100% of the time. And I'm sure I'll discover more, but here are a few for me that when I know my ego is present. One of them will be if it has to do with how much I obsess about how I look before I go somewhere, or if a picture's taken. Like, if I'm like, hey, I gotta see that picture before you like share that with other people, or before you even keep it, then that's an issue because, I'm worried about how I look to others. So that's a tip off to my ego. So now when people take pictures, I don't even really need to see it. I'm like, because that's me standing up to the ego, the need to be liked or the need to come across as perfect. So that's one thing that does it for me. Another one is if someone rejects my idea or a choice that I've made, or have something critical to say about it, or my ego will say it's criticism, but it's really just feedback. And I feel like it's an attack on me. My ego has shown up. And lastly, the last tip I would say would be if I cannot apologize for something. I feel injured, I feel like they injured me, or even if it's been determined that I was the one who had the shortcoming or did something that warrants an apology, my difficulty to give a full-throated, authentic, total ownership kind of apology lets me know that my ego has been in play.
And what kind of things has that cost you? I mean, when you're allowing the ego to control your life or to make the decisions for you, what does that cost? What is the price tag for that, Keith?
It's just a ton of suffering. I mean, disconnection from the people that I really want to be connected to, not being in the present moment, thinking about how I come across, a lack of empathy, consideration for other people. It's cost me a lot of ruminating thoughts, preoccupation with whatever it is that my ego feels bruised about or hurt over. It's just been a lot of pain.
One of the things that I think is really important to talk about, and we never do in this culture, particularly men, because men, I think, are much more protective of the idea of things that are masculine. You don't want to look feminine or weak in any way. You want to be powerful, you want to be in control, you want to be able to have all the answers. And when those things don't, maybe you don't do them as well as you'd like, then you start feeling like you have to act out and be even bigger than life or something. Do some corrective action when nothing is required at all. If you just show up and be normal and be who you are and act as you are, your ego may want you to do something more flashy, but nothing is required. Life is easy when you have no preferences. Life is easy when you don't have to have things a certain way, when you don't have to complain about the world not making it right for you, or that the other person isn't making it right for you. All of that's an illusion, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, there's this movie called Revolver, and it's a good movie. It stars Jason Statham in it, and there is a YouTube clip at the end of it in which they talk about the ego and how it's depicted in the movie. And one of the speakers talks about the ego is the greatest trickster of them all. It will do anything to protect itself. It will lie, cheat, steal, kill, the whole 9 yards to continue to be alive within you. And the greatest con that it ever pulled off was thinking that it's you, that its thoughts are your thoughts. Yeah. Like somebody doesn't like something that you did or gives you feedback on it, you take it personally when they're telling you something else. Someone tells you, hey, consider doing this differently, you feel attacked because it makes you think that it's attack on you.
It does.
If you don't get likes on Facebook or social media as many as someone else did, or if you didn't get invited somewhere, the ego feels bruised. It's the one that feels attacked. It makes you think it's you. And so once I discovered that there is a distinction between the conscious self and the little Keith, oh man, that was empowering for me. And then I went about the business of trying to train myself to manage it.
So do you have do you have this ability to kind of pull back and look at the big Keith or the conscious Keith and the little egotistical Keith? I mean, how do you develop that so that you can see both and see the contrast and see the potential suffering that little Keith is going to cost you?
The way that I do it is like some of those tips that some of those tip-offs earlier is I started to really do some focused thinking. Now, we talked about thinking, obsessive thinking. 99% of all thinking is useless and is ruminations and about stuff that's all made up and none of it's true. But there's this 1% that's actually useful that you're putting together a plan so you can take some action to complete a task. Like, you know, that's useful thinking. Like, you're going on a trip abroad, you need to do some thinking about how you're gonna map out your trip to be efficient with your time and to spend your money wisely. That's effective. The thinking about, should I wear this shirt, should I not wear this shirt? Are they gonna like what they see me in? Do I look fat in it? What's gonna happen when all that nonsense, you know, they didn't like me, they didn't call me, I didn't get the invite, all this other stuff, what am I gonna do tomorrow? All that stuff is nonsense, worrying about this or that. So I applied some useful thinking to trying to come up with some things that I could see that that the conscious Keith could see and identify in the moment that would tell me, okay, that's ego. Like I needed to have like a litmus test. And so one of the things would be my ego is very prideful and it always wants to win and be first. And if it's not, it wants to make up excuses why it wasn't. So for example, let's say that I'm in a foot race with somebody and they beat me. If my ego says, you know what, well, they should have beat me. You know, they've been running for years, they were on a track team in college, or they're younger, of course they beat me. Instead of going to the person and saying, hey, great job, man, or to a female, you know, you're fast, man, great job. If I just can't do that without qualification, that's ego.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know, if I'm trying to explain myself away about, you know, with somebody who has a really nice car, if I just can't appreciate, like, hey, that's a really nice car, as opposed to like, you know what, I used to have a car like that, or when I had my Lexus, you know, all of that is ego. So I started to try to tip myself off, or if I made a commitment to be somewhere on time, but I was late, and then I come in with a reason or excuse why I was late. Just any of those little things that tries to hide what I've done or what I did is ego showing up.
And that's the monitoring component we're talking about. Just training yourself to be aware of your ego taking over, trying to take over and run your life. That's the potential for a great deal of suffering and harm. So the monitoring, again,
Is key. Was key to the management.
Yeah, those tips, that's the monitoring. And then the second thing is when you're in that situation, Keith's example of, say, losing a foot race, the idea that you're putting yourself before the person who actually won is another indication that you're playing small ball.
That's right, ego's in play.
Yeah, and so I think the big cost of ego is there's nothing to protect. You're fine, you're a totally functioning, fully functioning person without it, and you are losing the opportunity to connect with others in areas that we truly need as humans. Love, gratitude, affection, understanding, compassion. Those things the ego doesn't have much use for. I mean, I think it's neutral about it. Yeah, if I can show that I'm, you know, contributing $100 to somebody and I get a stroke for it, okay, I'll do it. But that's not compassion. That's the ego.
Yeah, you know, along that way, along those lines, someone said, if you go feed the homeless, you know, that's for them. If you post yourself feeding the homeless on Facebook, that's for you.
That's so true. Well, man, that's perfect.
That's when you know that ego's in play, that
Totally.
everything you got to share, like, oh, my relationship is so wonderful. Let me share with you, like, how great my wife or my hubby is, or my ex. All of that, you know, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just be aware that ego's in play, and it's not, it obscures the true you. Because what if that relationship goes on the rocks and you guys are having some relationship struggles and challenges. We post that on Facebook too? Well, some people do, because they want the stroke for, I'm a victim.
Putting up with it.
I'm a victim now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Like somebody come tell me that it's
Poor Keith, how does he
there you
do
go.
it?
How to keep this? He gonna make it? Oh, you're such a great guy. It wants a stroke. I'm a great guy.
Yeah, that's right.
So the thing that I need something external to make me whole and complete.
That's the key.
Is what the ego wants all the time, and it can't get enough of it. It's just nibbling and eating, and you just cannot give it enough, and it's a dead end.
It's a dead end, and if you're playing in that game, you'll never get out of it alive, because you're never going to have enough. The ego always wants one more thing.
One more.
If you got a Mercedes, you need 2 Mercedes.
That's right.
If you got $1 million in the bank, you need 2 million.
That's right.
It's
We
always
need the latest, the greatest, the whole 9 yards.
insatiable. If you have one beautiful wife, maybe I need 2. I don't
Exactly.
know. Maybe I need a lover that's
Yeah, I
just
need
as
everyone to
pretty.
see that I have a beautiful wife or a beautiful or a handsome husband.
So here's the thing that I had a hard time with when I first went down this path and started to monitor, and then realized that I was causing myself pain with the illusion that I was separate from other people, and that I didn't really have room for compassion when I was playing this horrible ego game. One of the things that was hard for me was dealing with rejection and loss. Because again, the ego doesn't want to be rejected. You don't want to acknowledge that anything could hurt you, that there's been any loss. And one of the ways that I got around that was to say, if I were somebody outside of myself at the 30,000 foot view looking down, what would be the kind of person that I would want to be to react to that? And I would say, and this is really a good test for me, I would say, well, I would want that person to be understanding and compassionate, and to let it go. Let it go. You've been rejected. Okay. You can feel bad, and that's okay, feel bad, but let it go. Don't think of a way to get back. Mm-hmm. Don't think of a way to make it even, or
right.
to hurt another person.
Or disparage them.
To hurt another person just for the sake of making sure that they know that you're not a pushover. None of that is important.
None of it.
And I guess that ties in with the other thing we were going to talk about, and probably will in another podcast, which is you want to be in the world the change that you think is important. The way that you want other people to be is the way that you need to be.
Exactly.
You start with you.
Exactly. And I find that to show, for the kind of people that I want around me and how I want to experience life, loving, kind, patient, peaceful, with gratitude, that if I want that from others, then I have to do that myself. And the ego is not interested in doing that, and it will not allow me to do that because it wants it all for itself. So it's really important for me to have a really amazing, peaceful, calm life with minimal suffering. And with ego, there's nothing but a ton of suffering coming along the way.
The other thing to keep in mind, that's excellent. That's just a perfect summary of what we're talking about. The ego just always wants more. You just keep in mind, you don't have to make any changes, you don't have to believe us, but just keep in mind, every time the ego does something, keep in mind that it is controlling what you're doing, and that really isn't who you are. And keep in mind also that if you excised, if you removed that portion of your behavior, what would life be like for you? Think about that.
Yeah, to be constantly obsessed with being liked, what you're going to wear, how you look to others, like the freedom and the space of that. Not to take everything as a slight or someone hurting you or not treating you fairly. Not to have a complaint, because the ego doesn't. It loves complaining.
It loves to complain.
It loves about everything. This food wasn't right. They didn't treat me right. They didn't notice me. It just loves to complain. What would life to be like if you were free of complaints?
Free is the key. Free is the key. I mean, the idea is, wouldn't it be just cool just to show up?
Yeah.
Yeah, no mask.
Exactly.
Nothing to protect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, whatever.
Peace. It'd be peaceful.
I'm peaceful with you, my man.
Me too.
I love
you,
the
Rick.
show. I love you.
Thank you, man.